Hey, friends, welcome to the Present Solution Podcast. Here we're working together to be present as parents while raising our teens with purpose. And so we're going to tackle real issues and challenges in raising teens today. Hey, I'm your host, Mike Barsamian, and today we're talking about how skilled parents know how to practice strategic discipline. Now, there's a good chance you've never heard of strategic discipline before. And that's okay, but by the end of this episode, it's going to be your new favorite skill that you're going to want to develop as a parent. Now, as a longtime parent coach and parent myself, I believe that with the right tools, parents can actually learn how to pause, reflect, and act in alignment with their values, which, by the way, keeps you from the resentment and the regret that most parents feel that leads to like a shame cycle. And I believe that you can learn these things and do these things practically every day in your relationship, even when teenagers are pushing back hard. Now, what is strategic discipline? Well, let's get started with this. It's not about punishment. Actually, it's about teaching. And it's definitely not about control, but it is about alignment with who you are as a parent and who you want your teenager to become. So when parents learn to pause and identify what they actually value and respond from that place, rather than reacting from frustration or irritation or exhaustion, something changes in the relationship between you and your teen. Your teenager stops feeling managed and actually starts feeling led, and they feel safe and certain under that leadership. That distinction in and of itself, that matters more than most parents realize. Now, I'm going to share two practical frameworks: the 5 stages of strategic discipline, okay, which maps the internal journey that parents face when a real disciplinary moment arrives, and I'm going to show you a discipleship GPS. Okay, now that's going to be a tool for finding your way as a parent through those difficult moments with clarity instead of reactivity. So we're going to touch on those two things. Now, together, they actually offer a roadmap for moving from instinct to intentional action. Now, when most parents hear the word discipline, they picture punishment. That's been synonymous for too long, but they're actually different things, because punishment's about consequences, groundings, phone confiscation. It's escalating battles of will, but that's not actually what discipline means. The word itself comes from the Latin word disciplina, which means teaching, instruction, learning. Discipline, properly understood, is the act of guiding someone toward a standard. Okay, it's the work of a teacher, not a warden. Now, if you've grown up with the Christian faith, whether you're Catholic or Protestant, you know that Jesus had disciples. And as Christians, we're being discipled. And what does that mean? That's about teaching. It's modeling. It's Jesus duplicating himself in us. It's accountability. It's growth, and all of that in a good direction, right? But in most homes, when a teenager does something wrong, like they disrespect a parent or they break an agreement, they cut a corner or blow past the limit, the parent either reacts immediately out of frustration and says something that they regret, or they just freeze because they know that something needs to be said, but they don't know how to say it without blowing up the conversation or ruining the relationship or creating more separation or shame or disappointment in their kids. And so they just say nothing. Or on the other end, they just say too much, and usually the wrong way at the wrong time, right? And that moment could have been a genuine turning point, but it passes without the growth that was possible inside of it because we missed the opportunity. Now, I see this happen in almost every family that I coach. High achieving parents, parents who are thoughtful, capable, and deeply committed to their kids, parents who've given everything to make their teenager's life possible, and and they find themselves stuck in an exhausting cycle of reaction and regret and repeated problems, right? And the missing piece is almost never information. It's not that these parents don't know what matters. It's not that they haven't listened to great podcasts or gotten the books or any of those things. The missing piece is a framework. It's a strategy. It's the practical, tactical way of moving from what they feel in their gut to a response that actually teaches. And it's a way of practicing what I call strategic discipline. So strategic discipline, it's not about being harsh. It's about being principled as a parent. It's not about conflict, but it is about alignment. Strategic discipline simply is this. It's just the practice to responding to teens' behavior from a grounded, values-driven place rather than from reactivity, exhaustion, or the fear of conflict. Now, to be done right and done well, it requires 3 things that most parents never address. First, you need to know your own values clearly enough that you can access them under pressure, right? What do you actually stand for as a parent? What are the non-negotiables in your home? Not the preferences, not the hopes, but what are the lines that are drawn, okay? What kind of human being are you trying to raise? What does that require of you in this moment, right? And second, you got to understand the difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is what happens when your emotions run the show. A response is what happens when your values run the show. So both can look similar on the surface. Both might involve a firm, clear statement to your teen, but one is driven by frustration and fear. The other is driven by intention and love, right? Your teen can feel the difference, even if they can't articulate it or tell you, right? And number three, you need a process, because in the heat of the moment, when your teen is talking back, or you've discovered something that they've been hiding, or an agreement's been broken for the third or fourth time, you will not have time to think your way through a philosophy. You will not have enough time to think your way through Instagram Reels, or back to a podcast, or reference a book. Okay, you need a path that's already been walked in your mind, so that when that moment comes, you move through it with clarity instead of collapsing into a reaction, right? And that's what the two frameworks we're talking about today are for. Now, the foundation for strategic discipline is knowing your life OS. Hey, I call this the life operating system, right? Before either one of these frameworks can work, there's one prerequisite. You have to know your values, and not in a vague aspirational sense, not like I value honesty as a nice idea, but concretely enough that you can access your values under pressure and use them to make decisions in real time. These are the things that guide you as a parent. Now, I call this your life OS. It's something that I've created as a tool, and it's one of the central and most important things parents build with me in the Present Solution for Parents coaching program. It is the operating system. That's what it means. Life operating system that runs beneath every parenting decision you make, whether you've made it explicit or not. Your life OS includes your core personal values, the qualities that you want to embody as a parent, and your family values. Those are the standards, the boundaries, and the expectations you've established for your home. Now, what you'll come to understand and appreciate is that family values are not rules. Rules are specific. Be home by 10, no phones at dinner, homework before screens. Okay, one of my favorite is dishes before devices. All right. Values are the principles that give the rules their meaning: respect, responsibility, integrity, contribution, presence. When a teenager breaks a rule, the conversation that matters most is not about the rule. Okay? That's where most parents get stuck and there's conflict. It's actually about the value the rule was principled upon. Okay? You can only have that conversation if you know what the value is. When you have a clear, concise, memorable life OS, the discipline conversation has a foundation. Instead of reacting to the behavior, you can respond to the value that it violated. That's where we can get somewhere in our conversation with our teens and get them going on their mature growth path. Now, that's a completely different and far more powerful conversation. So let me break down the 5 stages of strategic discipline. Now, understand this. Using strategic discipline doesn't usually arrive all at once in the moment. Okay, this is something that builds sometimes across an afternoon, sometimes across maybe a few seconds, but always through internal stages in you that you will learn to recognize. So when parents learn to identify which stage they're in of the 5 I'm going to show you, they gain something critical. It's the ability to choose their next move instead of reacting to the last one. Okay, so when we talk about control in parenting, this is where you can learn to control yourself. Now, the first stage is tension. For parents, something feels off. There's a pattern of behavior that's been building in your teen. Your teen said something that landed wrong with you. You noticed something that you weren't supposed to see, or you found something that you didn't expect. And maybe nothing specific has happened yet, but your gut is telling you that a standard is being ignored, or a limit is being tested, a boundary is going to be crossed or has been crossed. Something important is at risk. Okay, it's the tension you feel inside. Something is off. That's that parent intuition. And internally in your mind, it sounds like I'm feeling uneasy about how things have been going. Something is happening I need to pay attention to. Okay, that's the first stage in the strategic discipline. It's our understanding. Now, most parents either ignore this stage because they're too busy, or they don't want the conflict, or they just tell themselves, oh, it's fine. Oh, it's just teenage stuff. Oh, it's just normal. Or they just skip directly to stage 5, and then they end up blowing up the moment without having done any of the internal work that makes a response effective. It's jump to reaction, right? Both approaches, ignoring it and reacting, waste the tension. Guys, tension is data, right? It's your values signaling misalignment. It's telling you something is out of character. We're going in the wrong direction. So you have to respect it. Set intuition. It's a red flag. It's a light on your dashboard. Respect it. Acknowledge the tension in your mind. Something's going on here. What is it? We have to explore. And then the next stage is stage 2 is acknowledgement. Now, for us as parents, is you name to yourself what value is being challenged in this moment, not the behavior, okay, but the value. What is going on at the value level? Your teenager is not just being disrespectful. The value of mutual respect in your home is being tested. They're not just blowing off the responsibilities. The family value of contribution is being eroded. Okay. The behavior is just the symptom. The value is what matters. So naming the value transforms vague frustration into really purposeful clarity, which is helpful for you as a parent. And here's what it sounds like as you coach yourself as a parent. What I'm seeing is a pattern of dishonesty, and honesty is a non-negotiable value in our home. That's what this is about. This is about honesty. Okay, so it's not about the lie. It's not that necessarily that they're hiding something. It's not that they're telling you the whole truth. Okay, those are all symptoms of the issue, that they are not holding up and maintaining the value of honesty. The standards of the behavior is off the charts, but we're not focused on the behavior. We're focused on what value is being ignored. Okay, this stage is where most parents short circuit the process. They stay at the level of the behavior because naming the value feels harder and more exposing, more parenting. But a teen who hears that was disrespectful, and a teenager who hears, hey, that violated the standard of respect, and that matters in our family and to me personally, those two teenagers are having completely different experiences. The second one is being parented. The first one is just being corrected. Okay. Important distinction. Stage 3 is engagement. You got to open the conversation, but not with an accusation. Okay. Start with a question. Get close, get curious. Start with an observation, maybe even an invitation. Okay. This is the step where you bring the issue into the relationship rather than letting it fester. Now, it might be a direct question. It might be a reflection of what you observed, but you're creating the conditions for a real conversation built on connection. You're not launching a prosecution and a bunch of accusations. Okay, so here's what this sounds like when you're talking to your teen. Look, I noticed something happening lately that I want to talk about. And look, this isn't a lecture. I just want us to actually talk about it together. Right? Here's what you have to remember. Engagement doesn't require confrontation. Often the most effective opening is the quietest. Your teenager is questioning and processing constantly. Is this a safe conversation or a dangerous one? They're wondering, am I going to have a safe and open conversation, or am I going to get lectured and is this going to be really bad for me, right? One is going to open them up, one's going to close them down, because the tone of your opening determines which experience they decide they're going to have, and that determines where the conversation is going to go and if it produces anything useful at all. Warm, direct, and calm. That's the winning combination. Warm, direct, and calm. Now, stage 4, that's about clarity. This is where you make it very clear what matters and why. Okay, you name the value, you name the standard and the expectation clearly. And you're not threatening, and you're not lecturing, and you're not catastrophizing. Let me be clear. In this stage of getting very clear, you are not threatening, you are not lecturing, and you're not catastrophizing, but you are simply being honest about what you see, what it means, and what needs to change. Okay, this stage is where you communicate that you're serious, not because you're angry, but because this matters to your family and their maturity, right? And it could sound like this. I want to be clear with you. The way things have been going isn't okay with me. Not because I'm frustrated, but because this conflicts with who I know you are and what we've agreed matters in our family. Clarity is the stage where most parents either rush past in an attempt to avoid conflict, or they just stay too long by repeating themselves and rephrasing what's going on. Look, say it once, say it clearly, and then stop. Okay, the most powerful clarity is the kind that doesn't need to be repeated 3 times to be heard. So if you've done the preceding stages well, this stage lands, right? If you haven't, you can repeat it 100 times and it won't, and you and your teen will be worn out. Okay, it won't matter, it won't land if you have to repeat it 100 times. Okay, stage number 5 is the action. This is when you follow through. Now, this might mean enforcing a consequence that was already established. Right? It might mean restructuring an agreement. It might mean removing a privilege until a standard has been demonstrated and their level of effort matches their level of opportunity. Okay? The tone can be warm or firm. Often both is the best combination, warm and firm, okay? Because you can be authoritative without being aggressive, right? But you can be firm. But listen, the commitment is clear. You are not going to let this pass. And you're doing this not because you're angry, but because you love your teen enough to hold the standard. And here's how you could communicate the action. Look, this is what's going to change. And this is what things are going to look like. Not as a punishment, because I believe in who you are and what you're capable of. And this is me holding that standard with you. Now, action without the preceding stages, it's just punishment. It's blunt force that aims for compliance and not growth. But action that arrives at the end of a well-navigated 5-stage process is something else entirely. It's teaching. right? It's the natural conclusion of a conversation that your teen can actually follow and actually make sense of and can learn from. So in reality, each stage builds more capacity, right? So practicing the early stages, noticing tension, naming the values, right? That makes the later ones less reactive and more powerful. So let me walk you through what this looks like in a real parenting situation. Now, Sarah is a parent who's in my coaching program. 15-year-old son had been struggling in school, and she'd been watching his effort decline for weeks. So there was less time studying, there was more time on his phone, he was increasingly dismissive when she raised concerns. Then the report card came. He's failing in a class he'd been doing well in all year. Now, Sarah immediately felt the tension. She also felt the pull to react, right? As any parent would. Take the phone, turn off the internet, lecture, demand an explanation, escalate. Instead, she paused. She moved to acknowledgement, right? What value was being challenged here? It wasn't about the grades. It was about the integrity and personal responsibility her son was growing in. Two things that she had worked hard to build in her son's character since she got clear on her family values. So she engaged. Son, I want to talk about something, and I generally want to understand what's been happening. Right? And then Sarah asked 3 questions around the grades that he had gotten. She asked what got in the way, what would you do differently, and what do you need from me? Great, simple 3 questions, right? And when the conversation revealed that he'd been avoiding the hard work because he was afraid of failing and he didn't know how to ask for help, Sarah moved to clarity. Look, I hear all that, and I'm glad you told me. I also need to be honest with you. Hiding from the hard things is not who I know you to be. So we're not going to pretend that this is okay, but we are also going to figure out how to move forward together. I mean, she just did this masterfully, and I was so proud of her when she recounted this story of how she articulated this to her son. Now, the action that followed, it wasn't punitive, it was structural. Together, they rebuilt his study plan. They got on the same page. They agreed on office hours, check-ins. They reduced phone time, not as a punishment, but as a contribution to his success. And the consequence was connected to the value, okay, not to Sarah's frustration. So ultimately, it brought them closer together because her son was seen, heard, and understood, and he felt the support his mom had always intended to give him. Look, the 5 stages map the internal journey you take to have this important conversation. But when the moment actually arrives, when your teenager is standing in front of you, something needs to be said right now. And you need a real-time tool to make this moment matter. And that's what I told you earlier. I call the discipleship GPS, okay? This is like a map that orients you to 3 simple questions in the moment, not 5 or 10, but just 3 really simple questions that you're going to need to access when your teen kind of triggers a response in you or something comes up, or you're going to have this strategic discipleship conversation with them, okay? Because under pressure, simplicity wins, right? And these 3 questions asked in this sequence will take you from being reactive to being intentional in about 60 seconds, okay? So the first question is, who am I, right? As a parent, who am I? You got to anchor in your values before anything else. What is it you stand for as a parent? What are the values you've committed to embody in your relationship with your teen? So before you open your mouth, before you decide what to do, you return to this. Not your mood, not your fear, not your exhaustion, but your values. The clearer your values are before the moment arrives, the more quickly you can access them when it does, right? This is exactly why knowing your life OS is the foundation of everything else in your parenting. Now, the second question is, what kind of moment is this? You got to read the situation before you respond to it, because not every parenting moment is a disciplined moment. Some moments are going to call for connection, not correction. Some moments are going to call for curiosity, not confrontation. Some situations involve a teen who's struggling, not defying. So before you respond, you got to assess what's actually happening here. What's the real issue? Not the surface behavior. Okay, what's the underlying driver? What are the stakes? Who's affected? Is it a pattern? Is this just an incident? Your response needs to match the actual situation, not the version of it that your frustration is presenting to you. And that's important to understand. Here's the third and final question. What does a parent like me do in a moment like this? So let your identity meet your action, right? This is the question that closes the loop. You know who you are. You've read the situation clearly. Now, what does a parent who holds these values in the specific situation with this teenager actually do? Not what would feel satisfying in the moment, not what would be easiest, not what you've defaulted to in the past. What is the response that is most congruent with who you are and most likely to teach what needs to be learned, right? This question moves you from reaction to response, and it allows you to be intentional and be a teacher and a leader to your teen, right? The discipleship GPS it's not a one-time decision tool. It's a cycle, okay? Locking in on your identity informs how you read and interpret a situation. Your reading of the situation informs your action, And then each act of principled, value-driven discipline strengthens the parent that you bring to the next moment. And over time, these moments compound, not just in your teenager's development, but in yours. Because the goal is to be a consistent parent. Consistency of values is what builds trust, and trust is what makes discipline actually work. So let me show you how the discipleship GPS looks like under some real pressure. Okay, David's a parent whose 16-year-old daughter, Avery, told him that she was sleeping at a friend's house on Friday night. Right? He found out the next morning through a mutual family connection, as it always seems to happen, that there had been a party. And there were no parents, and Avery had been there. Now, David felt the tension immediately, right? And he felt the pull to react was pretty intense. Betrayal, worry, anger, all of it, all at once. He had every right to those feelings, but he decided to pause. So he ran the GPS, the discipleship GPS, and he said, all right, who am I? I'm a parent who believes in honesty as a non-negotiable, who has worked hard to build a relationship where Avery knows that she can tell me the truth even when it's hard, right? I'm a parent who wants to lead with integrity, not with fear. Okay, he got grounded and rooted in his identity. Then he said, what type of moment is this? It's a serious one, okay? But it's not serious because a party happened. It's serious because Avery chose to lie rather than to come to me and be honest, right? The behavior at the party is secondary. The lie is the issue. The breach in honesty is the issue, okay? The stakes are the trust that the entire relationship runs on. That's the issue. Then he asked, all right, what's a parent like me do in this situation? Well, not blow up. That's not who he wants to be. Okay, not deliver a punishment that closes down the relationship and pushes his daughter further away. But he's also not a parent that's going to let this moment pass. And so his response was he waited till Sunday afternoon. Both he and Avery were calm. He opened the conversation with a question, not with an accusation. And he asked about the relationship. He said, hey, I want to talk about Friday because I care about us and what happens between us matters to me. So he named the value. Look, the issue for me isn't that you went to a party. The issue is that you lied to me. And honesty is the most important thing I've ever asked of you because it's a thing our relationship is built on. So he asked, and he didn't lecture. And that's a really important distinction. Here's what he asked. He said, help me understand what happened in your thinking when you made that decision. Right? And then he just listened, which is the right thing to do in this moment because Avery has to process, right? So Avery, who was disarmed by this calm composure and a genuine question, she told him everything. Said, look, I knew, she said that he'd know that, she knew that he'd say no, that she didn't want to miss out, that she told herself it wasn't that big of a deal. And so Dave reflected back. He says, so you knew it wasn't okay. You chose to not be honest with me anyway. That's what we need to talk about, right? You got to the value level. Now, there was a consequence, but the consequence was almost beside the point because Avery recognizing that the feeling of lying to her dad and not being honest and the hurt that caused her dad, that actually hurt more than the grounding she was experiencing, right? And guys, that's what strategic discipline produces. Not compliance in your teen, but a growing conscience, which is really important in their developmental stage, right? Not every parenting moment is as high stakes as a discovered lie or feeling great. Look, most of the daily discipline work happens in smaller moments, okay? It's the tone that crossed the line. It's the chore that was skipped again. It's the eye roll that communicated something that needed to be addressed. It's these quicker motors. It's these quieter moments that matter just as much because they're where the relationship standards are either held or quietly abandoned. And it's those patterns that are avoided that often lead to the problems that you experience in behavior, right? Now, like any skill, strategic discipline improves with deliberate practice, right? And the truth is, look, teenagers are complex, their emotions are running high. Some conversations are still going to feel like failures, even when you handled them really well. But what they do guarantee is this: over time, you will find yourself reacting less and responding more, right? You're going to find your teen is starting to trust the conversations instead of dreading them. And you're going to find that the moments of conflict, instead of driving a wedge, are actually building the relationship in a meaningful way. Now, I want to end with something that I think gets lost in almost every parenting conversation about discipline. When you practice strategic discipline, when you respond to your teenager's behavior from a value-driven, intentional place instead of a reactive one, you're not just shaping their behavior, you're actually modeling something that is far more valuable and far longer lasting. You are showing your teen what it looks like to have a disagreement and stay in the room, what it looks like to feel frustrated and respond with composure, what it looks like to hold a standard you believe in, even when it's hard and costly and unpopular. You're showing them what it looks like to be led by values instead of emotions, right? And that's not just parenting. That is one of the most important things a human being can learn. And your teen is learning it by watching you. Like, you don't have to start big. You just have to start. Pause before you react. Ask yourself who you are. Read the moment clearly, and then respond like the parent you actually want to be, right? That's not a perfect parent. That's a principled and a present one, right? And in the long arc of raising a teenager, that's the kind of parent who leaves a mark. Now, here's the thing. You don't feel like you have to do this alone. I built a community of parents who have committed to thriving through the teen years and growing their parenting skills through training, coaching, and accountability. So if you're ready for real change, look, go to presentsolutionforparents.com and check out the PACE Parent Masterclass, right? You can click the link around this video or on this podcast and find it too. But remember, this is important. Remember, renewal in relationships is not about new promises. It's about new patterns. So if you need any support in raising your teen and growing your family, reach out anytime. We're here for you. Be well, my friends.